This movie's going to be a little out of the ordinary for me, but it's still about philosophy. But what I'm going to do is, I saw a movie recently, a little while, a couple weeks ago I believe it was, The Dark Knight. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to extrapolate some philosophical considerations from the movie, because for a superhero movie, and really for a movie, especially as far as recently goes, movies have been getting kind of dumbed down recently, but I really believe that this was a very deep movie compared to the crap Hollywood usually pumps out. Okay, now the way I see it, there are really the three main characters are obvious: Batman, the Joker, and Harvey Dent. Now, I think the movie can be summed up a little bit in what the Joker said late in the movie when Batman saves him from falling off the one building. I guess this is what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. The Joker is clearly the unstoppable force of chaos, and Batman is clearly the immovable object. Well, I think if you look at it, there were three main perspectives. Each of these three individuals represented three main perspectives. The Joker represented the absolute 100% absence of any law whatsoever. He was the pure sociopath. Not only did he lack any conscience and didn't feel any remorse at anything that he did, he also lacked any fear, like the scene where Harvey has the gun pointed to his forehead and flipped the coin to determine whether he lived or died. He actually thought it was funny. He clearly has no fear whatsoever, and no laws, absolutely no laws. Harvey Dent was sort of the figure of order and justice, and he clearly pursued justice at any cost. But he had a different philosophy than Batman. That was quite obvious. Like in the scene with the schizophrenic man, he was willing to put a bullet in that guy's head. Batman was the one to stop him. He had a different perspective. He had a much more, what I would call a much more, I wouldn't really call it like, I would call it a very utilitarian perspective, but not the same kind of utilitarianism that I was talking about in another video. It's more of the absolute means to an end, more almost like what the USSR had. That sort of very simplistic utilitarian perspective. He seemed to have that. If you look at some of the scenes, he clearly was willing to use other individuals as a means to his end, which of course I now see that not all utilitarianism advocates using people as a means to an end. There are different perspectives on that, but he was clearly an ends justify the means utilitarian, and I think that's why he was unstable. I think that's why he became corrupted, and I think you can almost extrapolate symbolism from the coin that he flipped. It sort of represented that his philosophy and the Joker's philosophy were really just two sides of the same coin. He was willing to use people as a means to an end, and so was the Joker. The Joker's end was just pure chaos and destruction, whereas Harvey's end that he was seeking was the end of justice and order, and that's what he wanted. But then he became so easily corrupted because after he was confronted not only with his own hypocrisy, but just sort of the lawlessness of the world, he became so easily corrupted because he already didn't really have true law in him. He just had some vague notion of, oh, the ends justify the means for what I consider to be justice. And Batman, clearly, I mean, Batman is almost the personification of Immanuel Kant. I don't think I would quite go that far. I don't think he's the absolute categorical imperative, but he sort of represents it in this movie. I mean, he refuses to kill the Joker, even when, at the end of the movie, I mean, any sane utilitarian person, even people that don't believe in using others as a means to an end, would advocate just let him fall to his death. I mean, honestly, this guy is a complete menace. Let him fall to his death. But he didn't. He saved his life because he's the incorruptible soul. He's the individual that will never be corrupted. He will always be a being that seeks true justice and seeks true purity. He turned out to be the hero that Gotham needs, not Harvey Dent. And I think that I disagree with the movie that Harvey Dent was the hero that was this pure hero that they didn't deserve. I don't even believe that he was the hero they needed. I think Batman is clearly, obviously, the hero they needed, not only because he succeeded and is incorruptible, but also because I think he's really more of the just individual. But they're really all personifications of moral perspectives. The Joker is the personification of absolute chaos and nihilism, the pure example of the absolute pure sociopath. Harvey Dent is a personification of means to an end thinking, not too unlike some of the actions that the Soviet Union believed were for the greater good. And I think Batman's sort of a representation of some categorical imperative that refuses to cross the boundary even when it seems like the most reasonable option. The other thing in the movie that I thought was very interesting was the little social experiment that the Joker attempted with the two boats, with the two ferries. I thought that had a very interesting turnout. I don't know if that's what would happen in real life. The cynic in me would say no. But that was, once again, I think the movie was very pro-categorical imperative. I think it looked at everything from a somewhat Kantian perspective as the idea of justice. It clearly, because Harvey Dent was corrupted and because a utilitarian would say that the best result would have been the boat with the prisoners exploding, that's what should have happened. Well, some utilitarians would say that. I think it was very, I think it advocated a Kantian perspective, because what happened with the boats is what would have happened if people would be pure Kantian ethicists. If they follow pure categorical imperative ethics, that's what would have happened. You wouldn't consider the consequences of whose life is worth more. You all would have just considered taking a life is wrong as just a universal standard. And so that's what would have happened if everyone there followed the philosophy of Kant to begin with. And you notice that they debated about it from a utilitarian perspective for a while. And they kept considering means to an end, well, those are just criminals. And the criminals, of course, the symbols of anarchy, well, we don't care about those people, we only care about us. But eventually both the criminal ship and the other ship decided to throw, so eventually after considering it, they came to a Kantian idea. And I think that you can kind of extrapolate that from The Dark Knight. I think it was a very pro-Kantian movie. I mean, Batman, the final hero, is the true incorruptible soul. So, those are just a couple thoughts on the sort of ethical philosophy that you could derive from the movie. Maybe I'm reading way too much into it, but I think that I can justify these philosophies with evidence from the movie. So, those are my thoughts.